Welcome to the first segment of book review. I'm going to talk about the Thousand Sons book from Graham McNeill. It's in comparison to the other Horus Heresy books that I've read previous to this one is, I believe, it's the number 12. Yes, exactly, the 12th book from a series, from the Horus Heresy series. I'll give it, in comparison to the others, about 7. The lowest one, in my view, was Tales of Heresy, in my view, so far from the ones I've read. Why I say that? It's mostly because of the Emperor story in the Tales of Heresy, in which he kind of goes on a tangent that kind of sounds like one of those when I first became an atheist. It's on my teens and early 20s. The Emperor feels more like that. It feels more like a rebellious recent atheist. It's like it didn't quite sit right with me. It felt too superficial, in my view, in one of the tales mentioned in that book. So that's what dragged the book considerably to me, to the lowest 5. I'll rate it at around 7, the book A Thousand Sons, because it started really, really slow and it felt very, it felt like the guy didn't want to write it or something like that. I could be wrong, but at least it's what it felt to me as a reader. It's an interesting book, nonetheless. It gives you a bit of a depth into what the Thousand Sons where and how, and well, it's probably the first or the second step into their own fall to chaos. It's interesting, but as I said, it's a bit slow, and sometimes you just want to kill yourself after reading it. But it definitely gets a whole lot more better, more or less, at the end of the book. At least I think it's on the last 1/3 part of the book it becomes so much better. But there's one part in here that I do want to emphasize. It's the page 248, in which I love to point it out because it reminds me of what Games Workshop is today. And I think that's one of the things that actually saved the book in my own eye, and why I give it a 7 out of 10. It's the definition of the word bearers, which became kind of similar to what Games Workshop is today, and what a lot of the infiltration of the hobby has become, or what a lot of the infiltrators are. We are right because we say we are right. It said, agree with us and we'll be friends, disagree with us and we'll be enemies. This is what the Thousand Sons thought about the word bearers. This is exactly what the SJWs have been doing and are doing to the hobby, or what they believe to be. I've also took my time in reading this book because, well, let's just say it is exceptionally difficult to get Games Workshop books in this shithole of a country that I live in. It's the import taxes, because you actually have to pay a lot for it, and it then ends up costing a lot just to buy them. So I take my time to savor it as much as I possibly can, because not only are they bloody expensive for a book, they are also very difficult to get. So that's why you're not going to see much on the sense of a book review, and not going to get as numerous as I want it to be either, because I like to take my time with these books. So without ado, I'm gonna go here and explain a little bit about what the book is in that regard. Hopefully it's not too long, and hopefully I don't get too much on in regards to spoilers. There will be spoilers, so fair warning on that, but hopefully it's not as much as I would like to say. We can actually notice the author's self-insert in the book. We noticed that on a few books around the Horus Heresy books, for instance, on the first trilogy, on the first books, we see it's the... 1 second, let me take coffee. We can see it on the first few books. It's Gabriel Loken. It's the author's self-insert in the books. But at least it doesn't feel too bad. We can actually see that they actually added defects on the personality or shortcomings on the character itself. We can actually see that. It's so it's not too bad of a self-insert in comparison to all the self-inserts in some other books we have seen on other series or Mary Sue's. Let's face it, at least these characters are not Mary Sue's, or at least in the very strict definition of what a Mary Sue is. So this one is Ahriman, and it's it shows, but at least he's not a Mary Sue in that regard. The story starts in Agoru, in which Magnus tries to find out and discovers the webway. And in this book, without going too much into detail, so we can avoid the spoilers, because this is definitely part of a spoiler, in how Magnus discovers it, and the Emperor is aware of the webway. It describes exactly what the Emperor wants to do with the webway, but it does. I'm not going to go much into detail, but that's one of the projects that eventually makes Horus doubt that the Emperor is not telling him everything, and makes him feel unwanted. It's one of the reasons why he actually fell from grace and why he became the leader of the rebellion, of the traitorous Marines, the traitorous legions, and all of that. It's one of the reasons why he fell. He didn't know that the Emperor was building the webway as a way, kind of like its own webway, different from the Eldar, which is what the Eldar used to traverse the universe or the galaxy, because going inside the chaos of, or as you would call the Immaterium in this case, or as described by Warhammer itself, is kind of perilous. You need the Geller Fields, which is kind of a shield protecting the ship from the disgusting and mind-bending, mind-destroying realities of the Chaos universe, or as the Thousand Sons like to describe, the Great Ocean. It practically destroys the mind of everybody who peers and goes in there without training or without some sort of protection. And going there, it's a way of going from one place to the other without taking millennia to reach one place, because the universe, as you know, it's a pretty big place and an empty place nonetheless. But the Immaterium itself, in this warp, as we would like to refer to from now on, is it's kind of like it's a mechanic in the book that the characters use to go from one place to the other, but it's on itself kind of confusing, because if you go in there, you won't know exactly where you're going. So it needs kind of a beacon with the astrotelepathic or the astrotelepaths use inside the ships to guide their ships in relations of when or where they go through. It's what the Emperor used. It's the Emperor's. He creates it as a beacon, so it guides the ships of the Imperium, and there are thousands and millions upon millions of ships in the Imperium. It's a whole armada of ships, and they absolutely need that beacon. So much so that one of the reasons why they sacrifice so many Psykers in the 41st millennium is to keep the Emperor at least slightly alive, mostly dead, just so he can keep the beacon functioning. It was I'm not going to go much into the spoilers itself, but suffice to say, Magnus ruins everything and he becomes guilt-ridden, and it's one of the reasons why it goes into the book itself and a much later part of the book. But without going much into the spoilers, but this is definitely a spoiler. Magnus actually fights Lehman Russ after the Council of Nicaea, because Magnus, to actually warn the Emperor over the betrayal of Horus, he actually has to do a few spells about it. It's kind of, the spell itself, it's kind of heretical, and it costs the lives of a lot of people just to do it. And it's something that the Emperor warned Magnus not to do it in the Council of Nicaea. And you can actually see that Magnus is still, in some sort of way, in his own way, still loyal to the Emperor. Or at least in this book, in this section of the book, or on this section of the Horus Heresy books. He obviously becomes a traitor later on, but in some sort of way, it's kind of sad how Magnus ends up going to, or how he falls from grace, or how he becomes a traitor. It's kind of sad, because initially he was supposed to be trying to save the religion from the flesh change, because all Thousand Sun Space Marines has a flaw, a genetic defect, that if they kept using the powers, or if they would, if they kept existing itself, nonetheless, they start to corrupt. They become they start to change. Their flesh changes, modifies itself, and becomes kind of monsters and all that. It's addressed in the book on how it become, and what it was being done. And one of the techniques they used to delay the flesh change before they found out where Magnus lived, before the Emperor himself contacted Magnus. It's kind of heartbreaking how everything goes, and how Magnus thought he solved the problem, but in the end it was all for naught. It's kind of a book of you read it and it becomes kind of sad. It really is. But then again, this is what it is about the 41st and the 30th millennium. It's all about grimdark. You think that they are in the cusp of grandeur, of greatness, but it all falls down and it's a failure. Maybe that's why it connects so well with so many people, because in their own lives they are at the cusp of greatness, and one small event and it all goes down the drain. It's kind of interesting of how similar it is for the lives of many people. Anyway, in this picture it depicts one of the battles, and I'm pretty sure it is a spoiler, but then again it's a known spoiler throughout the community and everything, because this is part of what became of the 41st millennium. It's part of a known of the known lore of how Lehman was trying to capture Magnus for breaking the Nicaea consoles, kind of like a similar kind of deal of what happened with the Bible itself in Nicaea in Europe when they started to do all those things. But I'm digressing with real world politics and real world history with what happened in the Thousand Sons. It's the way it goes. It's one of the parts of finally the book starts to become interesting. It's halfway inside, or nearly, no, it's kind of nearly in the end of the good part of the book. It's nearing the end of that 1/3 of the book that I said that it becomes quite interesting. It's one of the battles, of the main battles on the book. It's suffice to say, Prospero is completely and utterly destroyed. It also deals with a lot of things in regards to of what the Thousand Sons or the planets were, or how its planet was, its capital planet. It deals with the native animals, or how the planet became before Magnus finally arrived in the planet itself. It's kind of interesting, the Psych Newen, of how it operates and how it shaped the society around the planet back then. It's interesting. It's obviously not part of the. Let's say it's kind of like the uphill or the hill in which you use for the part in which the part of the book it becomes interesting. It's kind of the start of that area. It deals with a few of the people in there, with a few characters that you hope, and I hope I get to see them, more of them again, because they became interesting, because it's not part of the self-insert of the author, even though I think part of it's also kind of kind of like, you kind of see that the author kind of inserted himself in there too, but not quite there. It's Lemuel Gauman. Let's see if I got the name correct, because as a part of the book, he kind of doesn't. Yes, it's correct. Either way, it's kind of an interesting book. I'll give it a 7. It's not one of my favorites, but it gets there. It's not one of the series that I've read so far. It's not one of the worst ones. Like I said, it's Tales of Heresy in my view, mostly because of one of the tales inserted in there. And I'm gonna try to end it. And by the way, in regards to the grammar and all the reading stuff in here, you can actually see it's a good value for the money in comparison to another book that I read. I think it was Flight of Eisenstein, or an earlier book than that. They increased the font, so the book looks bigger or more voluminous than it already is, instead of in what it really is. It's not very voluminous, but this one is. It's pretty thick, so it's at least it was a good value for the money. And I'm trying to ignore the taxes and the money that I actually had to pay, but based on the price it says here at the back of the book, which is $10 or nearly. It's nearly £8. It's $7.99, so just say it £8 because it's 1 cent of difference, or $10 or $9.99 in dollars. So it's at least it's a good value for the money if you pay this value. And not me, who actually had to pay nearly double of this for the book. It's a good value for the book, but what I'm gonna say is that there's a lot of grammar mistakes, typos, and things like that in the book that they should have caught, even though this one, let's see, which version is this one? Is this a second reprint, or it's first published in 2010, this edition published in 2019. This one is from 2019. I would have thought that after 9 years they would have fixed the grammar mistakes and typos, but they haven't. One of the other books, I think it was Legion, or maybe earlier, in which you actually... Oh, I think it was Fulgrim, or was it Descent of the Angels? Either way, one of the books in there, the entry, which they all the books in the series have, it's the kind of like the prologue. Mighty heroes to the battle, it's a description. Chief amongst the primates is Horus called the glorious, the brightest star, etc., etc. It's at the beginning of every single book. It was full of characters of glitches in the printing, kind of like... It's kind of weird they didn't catch that one. It's kind of like defects on the font, or the font didn't have the characters that they wanted to print, or things like that. But at least this one doesn't have, but you would think they would have fixed those things in these later editions, but they haven't, and it's kind of showing, but still, it's still good value for the money if you actually pay this or less for what they are asking in there in the book, and not more. Because I like the series, but living in a shithole that taxes even your farts, it's kind of difficult. And I'm sorry in trying to stuttering too much, because I want to address certain parts of the book, but I realize they are actually very big spoilers, and I'm doing this on the fly. I don't like reading, staring at the screen or something here with the points to talk about. Mostly because it will feel artificial in my view, and I don't want to go through all that. And it will drag on and on and on about things that may actually be important, but they are not, and it doesn't matter. And I'm all about low production values. I don't know if I'm gonna put the grading on the thumbnail or something like that for the book, because I don't know if it's worthwhile to actually grade the book from the Horus Heresy or something like that, because I haven't read the entire series. I'm only stuck on I just finished the book 12. I'm gonna start book 13, and I'm gonna try to drag on and on and on as much as I possibly can with those books, because even though I have an ADHD, and reading books for me only if they are really, really interesting, otherwise I'll just read the first few pages and then completely lose interest. Because I don't know, only very few books and series have managed to do that. And quite frankly, the first series of the books, besides being Lord of the Rings, is the Horus Heresy books. I haven't managed to read a series of books this many books on a series ever, because of the ADHD that I have. Because, like I said, if the book is boring or something, I'll definitely put it down. But if the book is good, I'll definitely keep on reading. Sometimes I'll even read half of a book in a day, if they are that good. And this is one of those books. Well, technically, Thousand Sons wasn't that interesting at the beginning, but still, it's the part of the series, and the series have managed to do that. For instance, the first books, everything Dan Abnett wrote, for instance, Legion and Horus Rising, was very, very interesting. Everything that James Swallow wrote, that one, I ate the book really fast, which was kind of a shame, because at the end I had to pinch my pennies just to buy the next book, because of how expensive everything is here around in this shithole I live in. Anyway, I've been dragging on and on and on about this, so thank you for watching. Hopefully it doesn't take too long, but also I hope it's not too soon that I do the next book review, because as you know, I don't want to go through this really fast because of the price. And if I go through it, it means that it's going to mean that I'll have to spend money too soon, and that you maybe get on some... I'm gonna have to pinch the penny and divest the funds from something else to cover it. So I don't want to do that, at least not soon. Not until the dollar really goes down or something like that. Anyway, thank you for watching. Good night.